Tuesday. I came home early. Through the kitchen window, I watched my wife Diane in the hot tub with Kyle, my daughter's husband. His hands worked her shoulders. She laughed, tilting her head back. The massage oil bottle caught afternoon light on the pool house counter. I stood there for 11 seconds, counted them. My coffee had gone cold in my hand. Then I walked to my workshop and opened the fireproof cabinet. The 2-part epoxy was exactly where I'd left it. Industrial grade, sets in 4 hours. Permanent. 1 click unsubscribe and a comment with your city helps more than you know. Thank you for watching. My name is Dominick Brenneman, 54 years old. 32 years at Millbrook Precision Manufacturing before I retired, specializing in aerospace components where tolerances measured 10/1000ths of an inch. 1 human hair is 3/1000ths. I worked in the space between invisible and impossible. The 1947 star at micrometer fit my palm like it had been machined for my hand. Some craftsmen in Detroit used this tool for 40 years. I could see the wear pattern on the thimble, the slight dulling where his thumb had rested 1,000,000 times. I'd found it at an estate sale, rusted and seized, and spent 3 weekends bringing it back. Now it held tolerance to 1/10. I met Diane at a company picnic in 1996. She worked accounts payable for a medical supply company, and her laugh carried across the pavilion, pulling heads like a compass needle. 24 years old, with a smile that made promises. I was the quiet machinist who showed up because my foreman said, "Free food." She found me at the edge of the crowd eating potato salad alone. "You look like you're calculating the structural integrity of that paper plate," she said, wondering why they made it octagonal instead of round. She laughed again, that bright sound. Does everything have to have a reason? In my experience, yes. We talked for 2 hours. She asked about my work, actually listened when I explained tolerances and specifications. Most people's eyes glazed over. Hers stayed focused. Our wedding was modest. 50 guests at a VFW hall, her mother crying happy tears in the front row. My father shook my hand afterward and said, "You picked a good one, son." Don't forget that. I didn't plan to. Megan came 3 years later. When she was 5, we bought this house because the yard sold us. Room for a girl to run and play safely. I remember Diane standing at the kitchen window watching Megan chase fireflies that first summer, her hand on my arm. "We did good," she said. We did. I started at Millbrook at 22, fresh out of trade school with hands that wouldn't stop shaking on my first lathe operation. Old Carl Dennison stood behind me, not touching the machine, just watching. "Breathe," he said. "The metal can feel when you're scared." By year 5, I was running my own station. By year 15, they gave me the aerospace contracts because my rejection rate was 0. Colleagues started calling it Brenneman Precision. I never had a single part sent back. 32 years, thousands of components, tolerances measured in fractions of a hair's width, 0 defects. I converted the garage into my workshop over successive weekends, ran the electrical myself, designed the ventilation for working with solvents and adhesives. Every detail done by my own hands. The Bridgeport mill came from a machine shop closure. The South Bend lathe took 3 months to restore. I spent more on tooling than some men spend on cars. The pool was Diane's request 15 years ago. She wanted summer parties, a place for Megan to bring friends. I saved for 3 years to give her what she wanted. Installed the flagstone patio myself, planted the arbor vitae she selected for privacy. The pool house came later, cedar siding to match the main structure. My design, contractor's labor. A changing room, storage for entertaining supplies. That window air conditioning unit she demanded because summer humidity in Ohio makes everything stick. When Megan brought Kyle home 6 years ago, I shook his hand and measured the man behind it. Regional sales manager. Firm grip held a beat too long. Eyes calculating while his mouth smiled. He called me sir that first dinner. But it sounded like a word he'd learned from a training manual. Great to meet you, sir. Megan talks about you all the time. She didn't. I knew because I paid attention to what my daughter said and didn't say. But a father wants to believe his daughter chose well. I kept my reservations in the same place I kept my micrometer calibrations. Recorded but not acted upon until verification. My granddaughter Sophie arrived 6 years ago. Marcus, 2 years later. They became the center of my retired life. Every Wednesday overnight, I read them stories while their mother Megan worked late shifts at the hospital. Sophie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, loved princess adventures with dragons and brave girls who saved themselves. Marcus, her 4-year-old brother, preferred rockets and dinosaurs. The bigger the better. I built Marcus a rocket nightlight in my workshop. LEDs inside turned aluminum, shaped like the Saturn V he'd seen in a picture book. The boy clutched it every visit, carried it room to room like a talisman. Grandpa made me the moon, he told his sister once. The vintage instrument collection filled the glass front cabinet near my workbench. Starrett and Brown and sharp tools from the 1940s and 50s. Each one found broken and restored to factory specifications. Some men collected stamps or coins. I collected proof that patience and precision could fix what others had given up on. 6 months after retirement, Diane stopped asking about my day. I didn't notice at first. Or maybe I noticed, but didn't want to measure. Her eyes began sliding past me like I'd become transparent. Conversations happened around me rather than with me. She'd ask the room questions I could answer, then answer herself. Before I opened my mouth, what should we have for dinner? I think chicken. When should we schedule the dentist? Next Tuesday works. Should we repaint the guest room? That blue would be nice. I became furniture. The kitchen renovation cost $14,000. Diane selected granite countertops, stainless appliances, cabinet hardware. She never asked my opinion once. I paid the bill without comment because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. Her calendar filled with appointments I wasn't part of. Pilates 3 times weekly. Salon visits that cost more than my monthly tool budget. A life coach she found through her book club. Sessions she never discussed when she came home. I filled my own calendar with micrometer restorations and silence. But I noticed discrepancies. I always have. 4 decimal places of attention trained on everything since age 22. The pattern emerged over 3 weeks of careful observation. Tuesday spa days started 8 months ago. Every week without exception. She left at noon, returned by 4, skin flushed in ways that massage tables don't cause. Kyle's BMW began appearing down the street on Tuesdays. 3 blocks away, behind the Hendersons' overgrown hedge. I noticed because I noticed things. Because a car that expensive doesn't blend into this neighborhood. New massage oils appeared monthly on the pool house counter, golden liquid in clear pump bottles. Diane had never used massage oils before last year. the outdoor speakers she demanded to cover the pool pump noise. The pump was nearly silent. I'd serviced it myself. I watched for 3 weeks, measuring the pattern, waiting to be certain before acting. Some things you can't unsee. Some measurements, once taken, can't be unfiled. But a man who spent 32 years ensuring 0 defects doesn't act on assumptions. He verifies, he documents. He waits until the tolerance is confirmed. Then he acts. I set the micrometer back in its velvet-lined case. The fireproof cabinet stood in the corner, its contents documented in the notebook I kept for hazardous materials. Industrial adhesives, solvents, 2-part epoxy compounds I'd used for bonding metal components when nothing else would hold. Professional grade, sets in 4 hours. Bonds skin on contact. I knew these materials like I knew my own tools. 32 years of handling them, respecting them, understanding exactly what they could do. The plan assembled itself with the clarity of a technical drawing. Not rage, not impulse. Just the next logical step when all measurements confirmed what you suspected. My hands stayed steady. 32 years of holding tolerance to a 10th. The disrespect didn't start with the hot tub. It started 18 months before that Tuesday, growing like rust on a precision instrument, so gradual you don't notice until the calibration's gone. Family barbecue in our backyard. I manned the grill while Kyle held court by the cooler, beer in hand, telling some story about closing a big sale. Diane stood next to him, closer than a mother-in-law needs to stand. His hand found the small of her back, not a pat, not a brief touch. His palms settled there, fingers spread wide across her sundress fabric, and stayed. 5 seconds. 10. I counted them the way I count everything. Diane didn't step away. She leaned into it, tilting her head to laugh at whatever he'd said. That laugh. Too bright. Too eager. The sound of a woman who wanted to be noticed. Wanted him to notice. I flipped the burgers, noted the observation, filed it away. 3 weeks later, Sunday dinner at our place. Megan helped me set the table, while Kyle poured wine and Diane arranged flowers she'd bought that morning. The conversation turned to some news story I'd been following. The infrastructure bill has some interesting implications for aerospace contracts, I said. The tolerances they're requiring for the new bridge components are actually tighter than what we used for. Dom doesn't really follow conversations anymore, Diane said. Not to me, to the table. To Kyle specifically, with an apologetic smile like she was explaining a pet's behavior. I stopped mid-sentence. My words hung there, unfinished, and no one seemed to notice they'd been cut off. Kyle nodded. His eyes had already moved past me to his wine glass. Retirement does that. My uncle was the same way, just kind of drifts off. Megan laughed. Nervous, not cruel, but she laughed. I finished setting the forks and said nothing. The pattern accelerated after that dinner. Kyle started calling me buddy with that particular inflection, the kind of false warmth that puts you in your place while smiling. He'd clap my shoulder at gatherings, grip it a beat too long. Hey buddy, how's the workshop? Building anything fun? He never waited for my answer. He'd already be turning to someone else, checking his reflection in the glass of wine he held, smoothing his hair with his free hand. At Megan's birthday dinner in March, he brought a bottle of Macallan, 18. Poured me a glass without asking if I wanted one. Dominick, buddy, you've got to try this. I know a guy who knows a guy. He pressed the glass into my hand. Probably more than you're used to, but treat yourself, right? The table watched. Diane beamed at his generosity. Megan smiled at her thoughtful husband. I sipped the scotch. It was fine. I'd had better at Millbrook retirement parties, but I said thank you because that's what you do when someone gives you something, even if it feels like charity. Kyle made the Thanksgiving joke 4 months later. Our dining room. Turkey I'd brined for 2 days, stuffing made from my mother's recipe. The good china Diane and I received as a wedding gift. 26 years of Thanksgivings at this table, and I stood at the head of it with the carving knife, same as always. Kyle raised his wine glass. Quit toast before Dom here gets started. To family, to good food, and to keeping the dinosaur entertained. The table laughed. All of them. Megan covered her mouth, but I saw her shoulders shake. Diane's eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. Even the grandchildren giggled, not understanding the joke, but responding to the adult's reaction. I carved the turkey, neat slices, consistent thickness. My hands stayed steady. After dinner, while I loaded the dishwasher, Diane stood at the counter scrolling through her phone. I mentioned something about the meal, asked if she'd noticed I'd tried a different herb blend in the stuffing. She didn't look up. That's nice. Her thumb kept moving across the screen. I tried again. The Armstrong contract I told you about, the one with the satellite housing tolerances. Dominick. She finally looked at me. That particular expression of exhausted patience. I'm in the middle of something. I closed my mouth, finished the dishes. The water ran hot enough to sting my hands, but I kept them submerged anyway. The financial requests started subtly. The kitchen renovation she needed because the old cabinets were embarrassing when she entertained. $14,000. She selected every element. The granite countertops, the undermount sink, the cabinet hardware from a catalog I never saw. And I wrote the check without being consulted on a single choice. 2 months later, a new car. Hers was only 6 years old, ran fine, but she'd been embarrassed at the salon. The other women drove nicer vehicles. $11,000 from our retirement savings covered the down payment. Then the pool house air conditioning. She'd been spending more time out there, she explained. Reading, relaxing. The Ohio humidity made it unbearable. I thought you'd want me to be comfortable, she said when I hesitated. Her voice carried that particular sharpness now, the edge that appeared whenever I questioned anything. Or should I just sweat in a building you designed? $18,000, installed within the week. I did the math later, sitting alone in my workshop with a calculator I didn't need. $43,000 in 2 years. Kitchen, car, air conditioning. Smaller expenses I'd barely noticed. The outdoor speakers, the privacy hedges trimmed monthly, massage oils that appeared on the pool house counter. Every dollar spent making it easier to betray me. The Thursday I confronted the pattern directly. Diane stood in the kitchen making dinner. Her phone buzzed 3 times while she chopped onions. You've had a lot of Tuesday appointments lately, I said. Casual. Testing. She stopped chopping. Spa days. You mentioned them a few times. Diane set down the knife, turned to face me with her arms crossed, hip against the counter. I'm allowed to have a life, Dominick. I didn't say you weren't. Not everything revolves around you sitting in that garage. Her voice rose. I spent 30 years supporting your career, raising our daughter, keeping this house running while you machined your little parts. Now I want some time for myself, and suddenly that's a problem? She walked out. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator I'd paid for. I stood there alone, staring at the granite countertops I'd financed, the house I'd maintained for 26 years. Then I sat down at the table and wrote the date in my notebook. Started a list. 3 weeks ago, I entered the pool house looking for proof. The AC filter was my excuse. Cool air hit my face. The window unit hummed at the setting Diane preferred. Towels stacked in the storage cabinet. Pool chemicals on the shelf. Massage oils on the counter. The faint smell of chlorine mixed with something sweeter. Everything in its place. I checked the filter. Clean enough. Then I opened the storage cabinet. Behind the towels, tucked against the back wall, a spiral notebook with a floral cover. The kind you'd buy at any drugstore for $3. I pulled it out. The pages were color-coded. Pink highlighter marked entries every Tuesday. Kyle's name appeared in Diane's handwriting. Times noted to the quarter hour. 1:30 p.m., 1:45 p.m., 2 p.m., every week for 2 years. Blue marked Wednesday grandchildren overnights. The anchor of our weekly schedule. The visits I looked forward to more than anything. Sophie and Marcus sleeping in the room I decorated with cartoon characters while their grandmother used those visits to plan around. Yellow marked my fishing trips, my workshop days, every absence cataloged and scheduled around. I turned the pages slowly. 2 years of systematic scheduling, over 100 Tuesdays, over 100 visits, over 100 betrayals, color-coded like a project management chart. The affair wasn't passion, it was logistics. I've been managed like inventory, my presence and absence tracked and optimized for maximum opportunity. I thought about the grandchildren sleeping upstairs on Wednesday nights, Marcus clutching his rocket nightlight in the room 15 feet from where their grandmother scheduled encounters with their father around nap times and pickup schedules. The calendar went back in its place behind the towels. I smoothed them exactly as I'd found them. Walking back to my workshop, something shifted. Not anger, something colder. The way metal feels after you've worked it to precise dimensions. Finished, measured, ready for its purpose. Quiet suspicion transformed into documented certainty. I had the pattern now, verified to 4 decimal places. The following Tuesday morning, I called Ray Martinez at 7:15, my former colleague from Millbrook, a man I'd known for 23 years. We'd planned this fishing trip for 2 weeks. Ray, I've got to cancel today. Not feeling great. You sure? Weather's supposed to be perfect. That pressure system moved through last night. Stomach thing. Hit me around 5 this morning. My voice didn't waver. Same tone I'd used for 32 years of status reports. Take care of yourself, Dom. We'll reschedule. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. The man staring back wore fishing clothes. Practical flannel, comfortable boots, the same vest I'd worn to a dozen trips with Ray over the years. Clothes for a day that would never happen. By 8:30, I'd moved my truck 3 blocks away, the spot I'd scouted last week, behind a row of overgrown forsythia bushes that hadn't been trimmed since the Millers moved to Florida. From there, the vehicle was invisible from Maple Court. I walked to the Hendersons' yard through their back gate. Margaret Henderson had given me permission 3 days ago when I mentioned checking our shared property line. She'd nodded, asked no questions. People trust retired machinists who've lived on their street for 26 years. The approach required patience. No hesitation. No second thoughts. 8 years ago, Diane had insisted on planting arborvitae along the back fence line. Privacy, she'd said, for the pool area, for entertaining. I'd spent 3 weekends digging holes, mixing soil amendments, installing the drip irrigation she demanded. Those hedges now provided my cover. I took my position at the northwest corner of our property, where a gap between two arbor vitae gave a clear sightline to the hot tub and pool house. The gap existed because one tree had struggled, never reaching the height of the others. Diane had complained about it for years. I'd always said I'd replace it. The outdoor speakers were already playing. Smooth jazz drifted across the yard at a volume designed to mask conversation. She'd turned them on before I left this morning. Preparation. At 1:47 p.m., Kyle's BMW appeared on our street. I checked my watch, noted the time. The same precision I'd applied to aerospace tolerances for 32 years now tracked my wife's affair. Kyle parked 3 houses down, behind the Hendersons' overgrown hedge. His usual spot. He thought he was being clever, parking at a distance, the assumption that no one would notice, no one would connect the dots, the arrogance of a man who'd never been held accountable for anything. He walked toward our house with his hands in his pockets, whistling something I couldn't identify. Regional sales manager, confident in his routine, secure in his invisibility. He'd done this over 100 times. The calendar proved it. Diane appeared at the back gate before he reached it. She wore the teal silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our 30th anniversary 2 years ago. I'd spent 3 days selecting it, visiting 4 different stores. The saleswoman at Nordstrom had helped me choose the color, said it would bring out her eyes. Now she wore it to greet her daughter's husband. Kyle slipped through the gate. Diane's hand found his arm, squeezed, pulled him toward the hot tub. They didn't bother going inside first. No pretense, no caution, just 2 people who'd done this so many times. The ritual had become routine. Steam rose from the water. The speakers played something with saxophones. Diane dropped the robe. I watched. My hands stayed steady. 32 years of precision work had trained the tremor out of them decades ago. The same hands that had held tolerances to 10,000ths of an inch now held position behind the arbor vitae, documenting what I saw. 43 minutes. My legs didn't cramp. My hands didn't shake. The training held. I observed with methodical attention, noting times, positions, the way Kyle's laugh carried across the yard, the way Diane tilted her head back, exposing her throat, a gesture I hadn't seen her make toward me in years. 14 minutes. I photographed them through a gap in the arbor vitae, not for courts, not for lawyers, for myself, to make the truth undeniable. At 22 minutes, Kyle stepped out of the hot tub to refill their wine glasses from the bottle on the pool house counter. I watched him move through the space I'd built, using the refrigerator I'd installed, pouring wine into glasses I'd paid for. At 31 minutes, they moved toward the pool house. The door closed behind them. The speakers kept playing. I walked to the pool house window on the far side, invisible from the interior angle. Through the glass, I could see the counter where Diane kept her supplies. The massage oil bottle sat in its usual place, pump bottle. Clear plastic, golden liquid with a lavender scent. She ordered it monthly from an upscale spa boutique in the short north. The color matched industrial epoxy almost exactly. Amber. Similar viscosity, indistinguishable at a glance to anyone who hadn't spent 3 decades working with both materials. I'd noticed this weeks ago, filed it away. Now the observation resolved into purpose. I moved to the storage cabinet on the pool house exterior, the one built into the siding that accessed the interior storage from outside. Diane had requested this design feature. Easier to retrieve pool supplies without tracking through the house, she'd said. I opened it. Behind the towels, The floral notebook remained exactly where I'd found it 3 weeks ago. I photographed each page. Pink Tuesday entries, blue Wednesday grandchildren visits, yellow fishing trips, 2 years of systematic scheduling, 2 years of managing my presence and absence like inventory control, 2 years of planning betrayal around Sophie and Marcus sleeping in the room I decorated with cartoon characters. I closed the cabinet without sound. The last possibility that I might be wrong disappeared. What remained was clear. These people had scheduled my humiliation around my grandchildren's visits. Every Tuesday, Kyle came here. Every Wednesday, Sophie and Marcus slept 15 feet from where their grandmother planned the next encounter. The logistics of infidelity organized around nap schedules and pickup times. They'd made me invisible so thoroughly that they conducted their affair in my backyard. My home. The pool I'd saved for 3 years to build. The pool house I'd designed. The hedges I'd planted with my own hands. I was furniture to them. Less than furniture. At least furniture serves a purpose. Kyle called Megan baby at family dinners. I'd heard him say it at Christmas, at Thanksgiving, at Sophie's birthday party last month. The same word he'd just used in the hot tub for Megan's mother. The same mouth, forming the same endearment for daughter and mother-in-law. The jazz saxophone drifted over the yard. Steam rose from the abandoned hot tub. Inside the pool house, sounds I had no desire to catalog. I retreated through the hedge the way I'd come. No one saw me. No one heard me. The invisible man moving through his own property like a ghost. Margaret Henderson waved from her kitchen window as I crossed her yard. I waved back. Normal. Routine. Just a neighbor checking a property line. My workshop smelled like machine oil and metal shavings. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar frequency, and the cool concrete floor steadied me as I walked to the corner. Everything in its place. The Bridgeport mill, the South Bend lathe, the glass cabinet of restored instruments, each one rescued from rust and neglect. I walked to the fireproof cabinet in the corner. The 2-part epoxy containers sat on the second shelf, exactly where I kept them. Industrial grade, aerospace certified. I'd bonded titanium housings with this compound, components that went into satellites, critical applications where failure meant catastrophe. I lifted one container. Read the specifications I'd memorized years ago. Set time, 90 seconds at room temperature. Full cure, 4 hours. Tensile strength, exceeding substrate integrity. Removal, extended acetone application. Medical supervision recommended. Bonds, skin on contact. I set the container on my workbench next to the 1947 Starrett micrometer. The worn thimble caught the fluorescent light. Some machinist in Detroit had used this tool for 40 years. Honest work. Honest measurements. The kind of precision that didn't care about intentions. Just facts. The plan took shape. Step by step. Component by component. The massage oil bottle held approximately 16 ounces. Mixed epoxy would match the color within acceptable tolerances. The viscosity would feel slightly different, but Diane always used generous amounts. She wouldn't notice until the burning sensation began. By then, 90 seconds would have passed. The swap would happen Thursday. Diane had Pilates at 10. Kyle had client meetings until noon. 3 hours of uninterrupted access. Thursday gave me time to prepare, to verify the color match, to ensure the viscosity aligned, to test the pump mechanism with the denser material. No rushing. Rushing ruins tolerances. I placed the epoxy container back in the fireproof cabinet and closed the door. The lock clicked with the precision of well-maintained hardware. In 2 days, I would return to the pool house. I would photograph the original bottle, partially peel the label for documentation, replace the contents with mixed compound, return everything to its exact position. Then I would wait for Tuesday. The 1947 micrometer fit my palm. I held it while the jazz music continued drifting from across the yard, barely audible through the workshop walls. Diane and Kyle were still in the pool house, still secure in their invisibility, still confident that the quiet man in the garage would never notice, never act, never matter. They'd measured wrong. 32 years of 0 defects. 32 years of tolerances held to 4 decimal places. I always noticed discrepancies. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I set down the micrometer and opened the fireproof cabinet. The 2-part epoxy containers sat on the second shelf. Industrial grade, aerospace certified, the same compound I'd used on aerospace contracts. Critical applications where bonds outlasted the components themselves. I lifted one container and read the specifications I'd memorized years ago. Mixed compound, amber color, viscosity similar to heavy honey, slight chemical odor masked by additives. Set time, 90 seconds at room temperature. Full cure, 4 hours. Bonds, skin on contact. The massage oil bottle in the pool house held 16 ounces of golden liquid with lavender scent. Diane ordered it monthly from an upscale spa boutique in the short north. Pump dispenser. Clear plastic. She always used generous amounts. I'd watched her go through a bottle every 3 weeks. The color would match within acceptable tolerances. The viscosity would feel slightly different, but not enough to register alarm. The lavender from residue in the bottle would mask any chemical smell. She wouldn't notice until the burning sensation began. By then, 90 seconds would have passed. I set the epoxy container on the workbench and pulled my notebook from the drawer. The same notebook where I tracked hazardous materials and tool calibrations. I turned to a blank page and began writing. Pool gate. The padlock I installed 5 years ago when Sophie was learning to walk. 1 key. My key. The gate was the only exit from the pool area without going around the entire house and through the front yard. Response time from inside the pool house to the gate, 8 to 12 seconds at a run. More than enough for full adhesion. Neighbor proximity. The Hendersons traveled most weekends. The Marshalls worked days. Sound carried poorly through the arbor vitae hedges I'd planted with my own hands. Even if someone heard something, they'd dismiss it as pool party noise. Emergency services, 11 minutes average for this district. I'd verified this through public records requests 3 weeks ago, filed under the guise of neighborhood watch research. 11 minutes from call to arrival. By then, the extraction process would require medical intervention. I calculated variables, the way I'd calculated tolerances for 3 decades. No assumptions, no guesses. Every measurement verified. Thursday was the window. Diane had Pilates at 1:47, 3 hours minimum before she returned. Kyle had client meetings until 5. Neither would expect anything wrong until next Tuesday. I closed the notebook and returned the epoxy to the cabinet. Each step locked into place. Specifications verified. Tolerances confirmed. No improvisation. No emotional decisions. Just the next logical step when all measurements confirmed what I already knew. Wednesday arrived with its usual rhythm. Sophie and Marcus stood at the front door at 5:30, overnight bags clutched in small hands. My daughter kissed them both and handed me the bags. "Thanks, Dad. I'll pick them up at 8 tomorrow." "We'll be fine," I said. Sophie wrapped her arms around my waist. 6 years old, with her mother's eyes and her grandmother's laugh. "Grandpa, can we do the princess book tonight? The one with the dragon, the one where the princess saves herself." Marcus tugged at my sleeve. His 4-year-old face was serious in the way only small children can be serious about important matters. "I want rockets, Grandpa." "We'll do both." Megan drove away, and I brought the children inside. Diane stood in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She looked up when we entered, and her smile was the smile of a woman without sins. Open, warm, the mask she'd worn for 2 years without a single crack. "There's my grandchildren," she said. Sophie ran to hug her. Marcus followed, clutching his overnight bag like a talisman. I watched Diane embrace them, her hands on their backs, pressing them close. I remembered those hands on Kyle's shoulders, the same lips that had found his, the same woman who scheduled these visits to clear her Tuesdays. The children slept in the room I decorated with cartoon characters while their grandmother organized betrayal around their nap schedules. Dinner passed in the performance of normalcy. Diane served pasta with the sauce she'd made 1,000 times. She asked about my day in the workshop. I answered with the truth, that I'd been cleaning tools and organizing supplies. She nodded without interest. "The grandchildren's room is all ready," she said. "Fresh sheets." "Good." Sophie chattered about her kindergarten class. Marcus showed me a drawing of a rocket that looked more like a carrot with fins. I praised it and promised to hang it in my workshop. After dinner, I took the children upstairs. Sophie's princess book was worn at the spine from repeated readings. She knew the story by heart, but wanted to hear it anyway. The princess didn't wait for rescue. She climbed out of the tower herself and befriended the dragon who'd been guarding her. "She was brave," Sophie said when I finished. "She was smart," I said. "She paid attention to everything around her and made a plan." Marcus was already asleep by the time I moved to his bed. His rocket nightlight glowed steady blue on the nightstand. LEDs inside turned aluminum, shaped like the Saturn V he'd seen in a picture book. I'd spent 4 weekends building it in my workshop, measuring the proportions against photographs, getting the details right. The boy clutched his stuffed dinosaur and murmured something about moons. I checked that the nightlight was positioned where he liked it, casting shadows that looked like launch smoke on the wall. Then I stood in the doorway and watched them both breathe. These children trusted the adults in their lives, their grandmother who tucked them in on Wednesdays, their father who picked them up on Thursdays, their grandfather who built them nightlights and read them stories. The schedule Diane maintained in her color-coded notebook had organized betrayal around these innocent visits for 2 years. Pink for Kyle, blue for grandchildren, yellow for my fishing trips. 100 Tuesdays of calculated infidelity, each one enabled by the Wednesday that followed. I closed the door softly and went downstairs. Diane sat on the couch with a magazine, glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when I entered. "Sleep?" "Both of them. Marcus still loves that nightlight you made." "I know," she returned to her magazine. I sat in my chair and watched the evening news without absorbing any of it. The performance of a normal Wednesday. 2 people in a room who had been married for 28 years, sharing space without sharing anything that mattered. At 10, she went to bed. I stayed up another hour, then checked on the grandchildren one more time before turning in. Sophie had kicked off her covers. I pulled them back over her shoulders. Thursday morning broke clear and warm. Kyle arrived at 8 to pick up the children. Megan was still at the hospital, pulling a double shift, so Kyle handled the morning transfer. He wore the pressed shirt and confident smile of a regional sales manager starting his workday. I stood in the kitchen doorway while the children put on their shoes. Kyle kissed Diane's cheek at the door. The gesture lasted less than a second. A son-in-law saying goodbye to his mother-in-law. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that would raise questions, but I saw the way his hand found her elbow. I saw the slight pressure of his fingers. I saw her lean into the contact by millimeters, a movement so small it would be invisible to anyone not measuring in 10,000ths. The same mouth, same smile. I noted this without expression. "Thanks for having them, Dominick," Kyle said. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were already on his phone. Anytime. The children hugged me goodbye. Sophie promised to bring me a drawing. Marcus said he dreamed about rockets. Then they were gone, loaded into Kyle's BMW, driving away to the house where their mother had no idea what her husband did on Tuesdays. Diane left for Pilates at 1047. I watched from the kitchen window as her car backed out of the driveway. Gym bag on the passenger seat. Phone in the cup holder. The routine she maintained 3 times a week. I waited 15 minutes to be certain she wouldn't return for a forgotten item. At 2002, I walked to the pool house. The air conditioning hummed at the setting she preferred, cool and dry. The space smelled faintly of chlorine and lavender, the scent of her massage oil lingering from Tuesday's use. I photographed the original bottle from multiple angles. Front label, side panel, pump mechanism, fill level, documentation of the before state, evidence, should it ever be needed, of what was there and what I replaced. The label peeled away with careful pressure. I photographed the partially removed label. Proof of premeditation if anyone ever asked. Proof that this wasn't accident or impulse. Then I retrieved the mixed epoxy from my workshop. The compound had the same amber color as the massage oil. I'd tested the mixture yesterday, measuring viscosity against a reference sample, close enough that distracted hands wouldn't notice the difference, close enough that the pump mechanism would dispense it without resistance. I inverted the bottle over the utility sink, watched the oil drain, then measured the epoxy mixture, 16 ounces exactly, and filled the bottle through a funnel. The lavender residue in the plastic mixed with the compound, masking the chemical smell. I replaced the pump, tested the mechanism, and set the bottle in its exact original position on the counter. Everything as she'd left it. Nothing moved, nothing missing, just the contents changed. I walked to the pool gate and tested the padlock. The mechanism clicked smoothly. I secured it and pocketed the key. One exit, one key, my key. The pool house door had a privacy lock on the inside. Standard hardware. It would slow any attempt to reach the gate by 3 to 5 seconds. Enough time. I returned to my workshop and washed my hands with acetone, then with industrial soap, then with regular soap. The compound wouldn't activate without the mixed components. But I'd worked with hazardous materials long enough to respect them. The fireproof cabinet closed with its familiar click. The micrometer sat on my workbench where I'd left it. I picked it up and felt the worn thimble against my thumb. Some machinist in Detroit had measured 10,000 parts with this tool. Honest work, honest measurements, the kind of precision that didn't care about intentions. I set the micrometer back in its case. The trap was set. The variables calculated. The tolerances verified. All that remained was Tuesday. Tuesday morning, I loaded the tackle box into my truck while Diane watched from the kitchen window. "I'm meeting Ray at the marina at 8, I called over my shoulder. "We're heading to Alum Creek. Should be back around 5. She nodded through the glass, coffee cup in hand, already losing interest. The fishing trip I'd rescheduled. The ordinary husband leaving for his ordinary day. I made a show of checking the gear. Rod cases. Cooler with sandwiches. The vest with its countless pockets for lures and leaders. Everything visible, everything ordinary. At the front door, I kissed her cheek. Her skin was cool, her attention elsewhere. "Have fun," she said. "Always do." I backed the truck out of the driveway at 8017, waved at Margaret Henderson, who was retrieving her newspaper in a bathrobe, drove past the marshal's place, where both cars were already gone for work, turned a left on Oak Street, then circled the block. The spot behind the overgrown forsythia bushes sat empty, waiting. I pulled in, killed the engine, and checked my watch. 3 blocks away, invisible from Maple Court. The same location I'd used last week. I walked through the Henderson backyard, same route as last week. The permission she'd given me still held. The house sat dark and quiet. No witnesses to the neighbor checking a property line. The arbor vitae hedge I'd planted 8 years ago provided cover as I moved along the northwest corner of my own property. Through the gap between 2 trees, I could see the pool, the hot tub, the pool house with its cedar siding catching morning sun. Everything quiet, everything waiting. I circled to the front of the house and let myself in through the door I'd used for 26 years. The hinges were silent. I'd oiled them myself last month. The kitchen smelled like Diane's coffee. Her mug sat in the sink, lipstick print on the rim. I walked to the breakfast nook and sat in my usual seat. The one facing the French doors, the one with a clear sight line to everything that mattered. The clock on the microwave read 9:443. 4 hours to wait. Maybe 5. The pattern held to a schedule, but variations occurred. Kyle sometimes ran late. Client meetings. Traffic. The ordinary delays of a regional sales manager's day. I didn't mind waiting. 32 years of precision work had trained patience into my bones. Some jobs required hours of setup for minutes of execution. This was no different. At noon, I made myself a sandwich. Ham from the deli counter at Kroger, Swiss cheese, yellow mustard, wheat bread from the loaf Diane had bought Sunday. I assembled it on the granite countertop she'd selected, without asking my opinion, used the knife she'd chosen, ate at the table in the kitchen I'd paid for. The sandwich was good, simple and honest. I poured iced tea from the pitcher in the refrigerator and returned to my seat. The outdoor speakers came alive at 1038. Smooth jazz drifted across the backyard. Saxophones and soft drums. Her Tuesday signal, her cover noise, the routine announcing itself. I'd installed those speakers on a Saturday afternoon, running wire through the eaves, positioning them for even sound distribution. My attention fixed on the street visible through the front window. At 1:52, Kyle's BMW appeared. 5 minutes later than last Tuesday, within tolerance. He parked 3 houses down, behind the Hendersons' overgrown hedge, and walked toward my house with his hands in his pockets. He walked like a man who'd done this 100 times. He had. Diane met him at the back gate. Same teal silk robe. Same smile. She took his hand and pulled him toward the hot tub without hesitation. I watched through the French doors. They settled into the water, steam rising around them. Kyle said something I couldn't hear. Diane laughed and tilted her head back. That gesture I remembered from our early years together. The gesture she hadn't made toward me in a decade. The jazz played. The afternoon stretched. I ate my sandwich in measured bites. At 2034, they emerged from the hot tub. Towels around their waists. Diane's robe hung over a patio chair. They walked toward the pool house. Kyle's hand on her lower back, fingers spread wide across her skin. The door closed behind them. Through the small window, I could see their shapes moving inside. Diane, reaching for the counter where she kept her supplies, the pump bottle in her hand. I finished the last bite of my sandwich, brushed crumbs from my fingers, waited. 3 minutes passed. Diane's laugh came through the outdoor speakers, mixing with the saxophone melody, that bright sound I remembered from our early years, now performed for another man. Then the music changed, not the jazz. Something underneath it, a sound that didn't belong. Confusion at first. A sharp intake of breath that might have been pleasure but wasn't. Kyle's voice, muffled through glass and distance. "What the?" Another sound, higher. "Diane, something's wrong." Her words carried across the yard, cutting through the saxophone solo. "Kyle, something's burning." I set down my iced tea glass. The yelps began as confusion. Two people trying to understand what their bodies were telling them. The burning sensation that comes after bonding begins. The realization that movement makes it worse. Stop, stop, stop. Kyle's voice lost its sales floor smoothness. "Diane, stop pulling. You're making it." A scream. Pain and fear combined into a sound I'd never heard from either of them. "What is this?" Diane's voice had risen an octave. "What's happening? I can't. Kyle, I can't move my—" The epoxy's 90-second set time had done its work. They'd applied generous amounts, as she always did. The compound had spread across contact points before the burning registered. By the time they understood, partial cure had begun. I stood and walked to the pool gate. The padlock was warm from afternoon sun. The mechanism clicked smoothly under my thumb. I tested it and found it secure. The key sat in my pocket. The only key. The one I'd carried since installing this gate to protect my grandchildren from drowning. The pool house door rattled. Someone trying the handle from inside, finding the privacy lock engaged. Kyle's voice again, attempting authority that had abandoned him. "Diane, listen to me. We need to stay calm. There has to be. I can't separate my hands." Her screams split the air. "Kyle, my hands are stuck to your—" I returned to the kitchen. The landline phone hung on the wall where it had hung for 26 years. The old number. The one that matched records, verified residency, established the caller as the concerned homeowner discovering an emergency. I lifted the receiver and dialed 911. "Emergency services. What's your location?" "Roof, Maple Court." My voice came out level, calm. The voice of a man reporting an unusual situation with appropriate concern. "I need emergency services. There's been an industrial adhesive accident in my pool house." "An adhesive accident, sir?" "2 people are stuck together. They'll need medical extraction. I came home early from fishing and heard screaming from the backyard." "Sir? Are you saying 2 people are physically adhered to each other?" "That's correct. Industrial epoxy, I think. I work with these compounds. Worked with them for 30 years. They're going to need acetone and probably professional medical assistance for removal." Emergency services are being dispatched. Please stay on the line. I'll meet them at the front door. I hung up and walked to the breakfast nook. Through the French doors, the pool house was visible against the afternoon sky. The door shook again, someone throwing their weight against it. But the privacy lock held, and even if they got out, the gate lock would stop them. I sat down in my usual seat. The screaming continued from across the yard. Diane's voice had gone hoarse. Kyle had stopped attempting authority and started making sounds I'd never heard from a grown man. The jazz kept playing, saxophones and soft drums, the cover noise doing its job in reverse now. Not hiding conversation, but accompanying chaos. I picked up my iced tea and took a long drink, chewed, swallowed. The screaming continued. 11 minutes. That was the average response time for this district. I'd verified it through public records. 11 minutes from call to arrival. By then, the extraction process would require medical intervention. The compound would have reached significant cure. Removal would be slow, painful, and thoroughly documented. The microwave clock read 2:41. I had time. I thought about the calendar I'd found behind the pool house towels. Pink for Kyle, blue for grandchildren, yellow for my fishing trips. 2 years of systematic scheduling, betrayal organized like inventory management. I thought about Sophie and Marcus sleeping in the room I decorated while their grandmother planned the next Tuesday around nap schedules. I thought about Kyle calling Megan baby at Christmas dinner, then calling her mother the same thing every week in my pool house. The screaming rose and fell, attempts at movement followed by sharper cries. The compound responded to stress by bonding tighter. They'd learn this soon. They'd learn to stay still. They'd have plenty of time to practice. At 2004-7, sirens became audible in the distance. I finished my iced tea and set the glass in the sink next to Diane's coffee mug. Then I walked to the front door to meet the emergency vehicles, already composing the expression of a confused husband who'd come home early to discover something terrible. The fire truck turned onto Maple Court. Behind me, through the French doors, the pool house door finally burst open. Kyle stumbled onto the patio, Diane attached to him in ways that would require medical photography to document. They made it 3 steps before hitting the locked gate. Kyle's eyes found me through the kitchen window. I raised my hand. A small wave, the gesture of a neighbor saying hello. The sirens grew louder. The jazz kept playing. And somewhere, in the space between confession and consequence, my wife and her lover discovered what it meant to be stuck with their choices. Fire Station 7 arrived in 6 minutes, 3 minutes faster than the district average. I'd verified through public records. Even emergency response times have tolerances. I noted the discrepancy as the engine turned on to Maple Court, lights strobing red and white against the afternoon sky. Captain Louis Medina stepped down from the cab first. 23 years on the job, according to the name and service bar on his uniform. His face gave nothing away. His eyes were already calculating as he approached the driveway where I stood waiting. "Sir, you called about an adhesive accident?" "That's right." I kept my voice measured, concerned homeowner, helpful citizen. I came home early from fishing and heard screaming from the backyard. Found 2 people in my pool house. They've got industrial epoxy on them, the kind I used to work with at Millbrook Precision, aerospace components. Medina nodded, processing. Behind him, 2 more responders climbed out. A young man with the nervous energy of someone new to the job. His name tag read Webb. 3rd week out of training, if I had to guess. The other was EMT Janet Okonkwo, carrying a documentation kit. "You have the key to the pool area?" Medina asked. I held up the brass Schlage key. "Installed the lock myself for the grandchildren's safety." We walked around the house. The jazz still played from the outdoor speakers, saxophones drifting over the yard. Through the arbor vitae, the pool house was visible. The door hung open now. 2 figures sat on the patio near the locked gate. I unlocked it. Medina went through first. Webb followed, and his jaw went slack. He looked at Medina, back at the patio, back at Medina. His captain didn't acknowledge him. Okonkwo moved past me with her kit. She didn't hurry. She didn't slow down. But when she reached the patio and got her first clear look at Diane and Kyle, her stride faltered. They sat on the flagstone, wrapped in towels that covered almost nothing. Kyle's left hand was bonded to Diane's right hip. His shoulder adhered to her collarbone. Their legs had multiple contact points where the epoxy had spread during their attempts to separate. The amber compound was visible on their skin, already cured to a hard finish at the edges, still tacky where fresh acetone might help. "What the hell happened here?" Webb said. The words came out before he could stop him. Medina shot him a look. The rookie closed his mouth. "Folks." Medina crouched to their level, his voice controlled but tight. "I need you to stop moving. Any pulling will cause tissue damage. Do you understand?" Kyle's face was red, sweat and tears. His voice cracked on the word please. "We need help. Please." "It's burning. We're going to help you. But I need you both to stay still while we assess the situation." Diane looked up at me. Her eyes found mine through the chaos, and her expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed. The victim story was already forming. "Someone did this to us," she said. "The oil was sabotaged. Someone switched it." Medina pulled a notepad from his pocket. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" "Diane Brenneman. This is my house." "And you, sir?" Kyle hesitated. "1 second. 2. Long enough for everyone to notice." "Kyle Whitfield. Relationship to the homeowner?" Another pause. Webb glanced at me, then back at Kyle. "Son-in-law?" Kyle said. Okonkwo had set down her documentation kit and begun photographing the scene. Protocol. Every emergency response required records, photographs from multiple angles, notes on the nature of the incident, names, addresses, relationships. I watched her lens capture Kyle's hand on Diane's hip, the spread of adhesive across contact points that told their own story, the massage oil bottle visible through the pool house door, its contents now clearly not massage oil. "I work with these compounds," I said to Medina. "Worked with them for 32 years. Industrial epoxy, aerospace grade. Sets in 90 seconds. You'll need acetone for removal, but it has to be careful. Slow. Rush it and you'll tear skin." Medina nodded. "Webb, get the acetone kit from the truck. Industrial grade if we have it." The rookie practically ran. "Sir, can you give us some space to work?" Medina asked me. "Of course." I stepped back toward the gate. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." I walked to the house without looking back. Through the French doors, I could see everything. Okonkwo knelt beside them with swabs and acetone. Each application required waiting, testing, reapplying. The compound didn't release easily. It was designed to hold satellite housings together through atmospheric re-entry. Human skin presented no challenge. 38 minutes. I tracked the time on the kitchen clock. Kyle tried explanation 3 times. Each attempt died in his throat as he realized words made it worse. "This isn't what it looks like," he started once. Webb's face said otherwise. The rookie had stopped trying to hide his reaction. His expression bounced between disgust and disbelief with each glance at the documented scene. "We were just getting a massage." Kyle tried again. Okonkwo's documentation paused. Her pen hovered over the page as she looked at the bonding points, the inadequate towels, the clear evidence that massage was not what had occurred. Diane stayed silent after her initial accusation. She understood, I think, that every word created more questions. Why was Kyle here? Why was she in a towel? Why was the massage oil in the pool house instead of a spa? The extraction continued. Swab, wait, test. Swab, wait, test. Webb brought fresh acetone when the first batch ran low. Medina worked on the largest adhesion point, the one between Kyle's palm and Diane's hip, where the compound had spread during initial bonding. "Ma'am, I need you to breathe slowly," Medina said. "This is going to sting," Diane whimpered. Not the sound of a woman in control. The sound of someone whose carefully constructed world was dissolving with the adhesive. By minute 24, they'd separated the shoulder from collarbone. The skin underneath was red and irritated, but intact. Proper technique. Patience over speed. By minute 31, the legs were free. Webb helped Kyle to a standing position, while Okonkwo continued documenting. The final separation, Kyle's hand from Diane's hip, took 7 minutes of careful work. When it released, Kyle stumbled backward. 3 feet between them for the first time in nearly an hour. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. "We'll need statements from both of you," Medina said. "Standard procedure for incident reports." "Incident reports?" Diane's voice cracked. "This goes in a report?" "All emergency responses require documentation, ma'am. Names, addresses, nature of the emergency, actions taken." "You can't write this down. People will see it." Medina's face remained neutral. "County records are public, ma'am. That's not within my control." I stood in the kitchen doorway. Helpful homeowner. Concerned husband discovering his wife's accident. "Captain, is there anything else you need from me?" "We have your statement, Mr. Brenneman. We'll include it in the report." I nodded. "I hope they'll be all right. It's a terrible accident." Kyle's eyes found mine. Recognition dawned, not of what I'd done, but of what I knew, what I'd seen. What would now be documented in county records accessible to anyone who requested them. "The oil," he said. "Someone switched the oil." Medina made a note. "We'll include that in the report as well, sir." The crew packed their equipment. Okonkwo's documentation kit held photographs and notes that would become permanent bureaucratic record. Names, addresses, relationship to homeowner, nature of predicament, clinical descriptions that spared no dignity. The emergency vehicles left Maple Court at 4:17 p.m. Margaret Henderson stood on her porch watching. The marshals had returned from work early, drawn by the lights. 3 neighbors who would have questions. 3 neighbors who would eventually hear answers. Diane and Kyle remained in the backyard. They hadn't spoken to each other since the separation. She sat on a patio chair, wrapped in a proper robe now, staring at the pool house. He stood near the gate, phone in hand, not making calls. I went to my workshop. The 1947 Starrett micrometer sat on the workbench where I'd left it. I picked it up, felt the familiar weight, the worn thimble where some machinist in Detroit had rested his thumb 1,000,000 times. Broken things can work again. It just requires patience. Within 3 days, 3 neighbors knew the full story. Emergency vehicles draw attention. Firefighters talk to spouses. Spouses talk to friends. Within the week, the story reached Megan Whitfield, a coworker at the hospital whose husband was a firefighter at Station 7. He'd responded to that call at the Brenneman place, the one with the son-in-law and the mother-in-law and the industrial adhesive. The coworker told the story as gossip. Megan heard it as betrayal. Kyle lost his regional sales manager position by week 3. The company cited conduct unbecoming. Human Resources had received an anonymous copy of the emergency response report. They found the documentation compelling. Megan filed for divorce by week 4. The incident report became Exhibit A, adultery proven beyond denial, documented by county emergency services, photographed and cataloged with clinical precision. She received primary custody of Sophie and Marcus. She received the house. She received support payments that would last until the children reached 18. Diane received divorce papers from me the same week. I attached the hidden calendar with its pink highlights for Kyle, blue for grandchildren, yellow for my fishing trips. I attached photographs of the original massage oil bottle and its peeled label. I attached bank statements showing $43,000 spent, making the affair convenient. She didn't contest anything. The pool house stands empty now. Cedar siding still matches the main structure. Window AC unit still hums at the setting she preferred, but no one goes in there anymore. Some spaces become monuments to specific moments. The flagstone patio where they sat bonded together. The counter where the bottle waited. The gate I locked and unlocked with the only key. The stories spread through the community like the epoxy spread across their skin. Impossible to remove without leaving marks. Your support means everything. Please like and drop a score from 1 to 10 in the comments. I appreciate you. 8 months later, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on Riverside Drive. Red brick, 4 stories, a parking lot that needs repaving. The windows face east, and Megan's house sits 3 blocks away. I can walk there in 6 minutes. My grandchildren Sophie and Marcus come every Wednesday at 5:30. Same schedule we've always kept. Different address, different circumstances. The apartment has a 2nd bedroom I converted into a workshop. Smaller than the garage space I built over 20 years, but sufficient. I mounted the glass front cabinet on the wall above the workbench. My star, red and brown and sharp instruments, each one rescued from rust and neglect, catch the fluorescent light the same way they did before. The 1952 Outside Micrometer sits in front of me now, seized and corroded when I found it at an estate sale last month. Some machinist in Akron used this tool for decades. I can see the wear pattern on the frame where his palm rested. I apply penetrating oil to the spindle threads. Let it soak. Wait. My daughter Megan struggled at first. The revelation hit her in layers. First, her husband, then her mother, then the scope of it, the calendar, the scheduling, the 2 years of systematic betrayal organized around her children's visits. 3 weeks of silence, no calls, no visits. The grandchildren arrived with Megan's neighbor instead. Then she came to my apartment on a Sunday afternoon. Sophie and Marcus were at Kyle's place for his court-mandated visitation. She sat at my kitchen table with coffee going cold in her hands. "Did you know," she asked, "before you called the paramedics?" I set down the micrometer I'd been cleaning. Her eyes held mine without flinching. My daughter, Megan Whitfield, 31 years old, with her mother's face and my attention to detail. I measured it, I said. Then I acted. She nodded. Her fingers wrapped around the mug. Some truths don't require discussion. The evidence speaks. The pattern confirms. You verify, document, and act. Everything else is commentary. We sat without speaking for several minutes, not uncomfortable. Two people who understand that words can't add to what facts have already established. Wednesday still works for the kids, she said finally. Wednesday works. She left without hugging me goodbye. 2 weeks later, she started hugging me again. I pick up the penetrating oil and apply another drop to the micrometer's threads. The spindle moves a fraction of a turn. Progress. Through the window, late afternoon sun angles across the parking lot. In an hour, Megan will drop off the grandchildren. Sophie will want the princess book. Marcus will show me whatever drawing he made this week. The routine continues. Some patterns deserve preserving. I work the micrometer spindle back and forth, feeling the resistance decrease with each application of oil. The compound that sees this tool built up over years of neglect, it won't release in an afternoon, but it will release. Our broken things can work again. It just requires knowing exactly what you're measuring.